The engine purred softly as I slid into the passenger seat of Sebastian's car, the leather cool against my skin. He was older than I expected, though I hadn't known what to expect, really. My friend's father was a mystery, a figure spoken of in hushed tones. Confident, enigmatic, and just a little unsettling, she'd once said. Now, as his eyes met mine, I understood why. "Buckle up," he said, his voice low and smooth, like gravel underfoot. There was something in the way he held himself. Calm, but with an edge, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. I did as I was told, the click of the seatbelt echoing in the quiet space between us. The drive began in silence, the kind that feels heavy, loaded with unspoken words. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. His hands gripped the wheel with a controlled tension, his jaw set in a way that suggested he was used to holding back. "What are you hiding?" I wondered, and the question lingered in the air, unanswered. Eventually, he broke the silence. "So, Alexander," he began, his tone casual but laced with something deeper, "what do you think of the unknown?" I blinked, caught off guard. "The unknown." He nodded, his eyes still on the road. "The things we can't see, the things we don't understand. It's intriguing, isn't it? The way it pulls us in, even when we know it might be dangerous." I wasn't sure how to respond. His words felt like a test, a way of probing into my thoughts. "I guess it depends," I said carefully. "Sometimes the unknown is worth exploring. Other times, it's better left alone." He chuckled softly, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Wise words, but not everyone has the luxury of choice. There was a weight to his voice that made me pause. I wanted to ask what he meant, but before I could, he turned down a narrow, unmarked road. The trees closed in around us, their branches casting long shadows across the car. The atmosphere shifted, growing heavier, more charged. I felt a prickle of unease creep up my neck. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "Just a quick stop," he said, his tone betraying nothing. "Someone I need to see." We pulled up to a small, weathered house, its porch sagging under the weight of time. A man stood there, his figure tense, his eyes darting nervously around. Sebastian got out of the car, and I hesitated before following, my heart beating a little faster. The man on the porch nodded at Sebastian, his expression tight. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I didn't have a choice," Sebastian replied, his tone calm but firm. "We need to talk." The man glanced at me, his eyes narrowing. "Who's this?" "A friend," Sebastian said simply, though the word felt heavy with unspoken meaning. The man didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. As they spoke in low voices, I stayed back, feeling like an intruder in a world I didn't belong to. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that we were being watched. When Sebastian returned to the car, his expression was unreadable. "Let's go," he said, his voice clipped. I didn't ask questions as we drove away, but the silence between us felt different now, charged with something I couldn't name. My mind raced, trying to piece together what I'd just witnessed. The man's fear, the way he'd looked at me, it all felt wrong. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice breaking the stillness. Sebastian hesitated, his grip tightening on the wheel. "Someone from my past," he said, his tone guarded. "Someone dangerous." "Dangerous how?" He glanced at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Vulnerability, maybe, or fear. "His name is Dominic," he said slowly, "and he's not someone you want to cross." The name sent a chill through me. "What does he want?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Me." The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I wanted to press him for more, but the look on his face stopped me. There was a story there, one he wasn't ready to tell. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already a part of it. We drove in silence for a while longer, the tension between us growing with every mile. Then, out of nowhere, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, closing in fast. Sebastian's eyes flicked to the mirror, his expression hardening. "Hold on," he said, his voice tight. The car lurched forward as he pressed the accelerator, the engine roaring to life. I gripped the door handle, my heart pounding as the headlights behind us grew closer. The road twisted and turned, the trees flashing by in a blur. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, but Sebastian's focus was unshakable. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Dominic," he said simply, his eyes fixed on the road. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I glanced back, the headlights blinding in the darkness. "What does he want?" "Me," Sebastian repeated, his voice low and steady. "And now, you." The words sent a jolt of fear through me, but there was something else too, a strange sense of determination. I didn't know why, but I knew I couldn't let him face this alone. We swerved down a narrow side road, the tires skidding on the gravel. Sebastian's hands were steady on the wheel, his focus unbroken. The headlights behind us grew smaller as we gained distance, but I knew it wasn't over. "We need to find somewhere to hide," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. I nodded, my mind racing. "There's a motel up ahead," I said, remembering the sign we'd passed earlier. "We could stop there." Sebastian glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "Good idea." We pulled into the motel parking lot, the neon sign flickering in the darkness. Sebastian parked the car in the shadows, his eyes scanning the area. "Let's go," he said, his voice low. We hurried to a room at the far end of the building, the key fumbling in his hands as he unlocked the door. Inside, it was dimly lit, the air stale and heavy. Sebastian locked the door behind us, his shoulders tense. "We should be safe here," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling. "What happens now?" He turned to me, his eyes dark and intense. "Now, we wait." The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken thoughts. I could feel the weight of his gaze, the intensity of it making my skin prickle. There was something there, something I couldn't quite name, something that made my heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, his expression softening. "Because I couldn't leave you behind," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "Not when I knew he'd come after you too." The words hit me like a wave, carrying with them a flood of emotions I wasn't ready to face. I could feel the walls I'd built around myself starting to crack, the weight of everything we'd been through pressing down on me. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice trembling. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands gentle as they cupped my face. "You don't have to do anything," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Just trust me." I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I let myself truly see him, not as my friend's father, not as the mysterious figure I'd built up in my mind, but as Sebastian. And in that moment, I knew I'd already made my choice. "I trust you," I whispered, the words hanging in the air between us. His breath caught, and for a moment, I thought he might pull away. But then he leaned in, his forehead resting against mine, and the world seemed to fall away. "Alexander," he said, his voice barely audible, "you're more than I ever expected." I closed my eyes, the weight of his words sinking in. "And you're more than I could have imagined." The room was quiet, the tension between us thick with unspoken desires and fears. I could feel the heat of his body, the way his breath mingled with mine, and I knew there was no turning back. But before either of us could speak, the sound of a car engine outside shattered the moment. Sebastian's eyes snapped to the window, his body tensing. "He's here," he said, his voice tight. Fear surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What do we do?" He looked at me, his expression fierce. "We fight." The engine's growl grew louder outside the motel room, tires crunching over gravel as the car slowed to a stop. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a drum. Sebastian was already moving, his movements sharp and deliberate. He grabbed a lamp from the nightstand, yanking the cord out of the wall, and handed it to me without a word. His eyes met mine, and in that moment, I understood. This was it. "Stay behind me," he murmured, his voice low but steady. He pressed his ear to the door, listening for any movement outside. The seconds stretched into an eternity, the silence so heavy it felt like it could crush me. Then, a soft knock. Once, twice, 3 times. Sebastian's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. I gripped the lamp tightly, my palms slick with sweat. What if it's not him? I thought. What if it's someone else, someone innocent? But Sebastian's expression told me everything I needed to know. He was certain. The door rattled as a fist pounded against it, and a voice, low, guttural, and dripping with menace, called out, "Sebastian, open the door. I know you're in there." It was Dominic. I didn't need to ask. The way Sebastian's body tensed, the way his breath hitched for just a second, told me all I needed to know. Dominic's voice was like a cold hand wrapping around my throat, squeezing until I could barely breathe. "What do you want?" Sebastian called back, his voice firm but laced with caution. "You," Dominic replied simply, his tone chillingly calm. "And the boy. I know he's with you." I shot through my veins. He knows about me. My grip on the lamp tightened until my knuckles turned white. Sebastian glanced back at me, his eyes softening for just a moment before hardening again. He shook his head slowly, as if to say, "Don't worry. I've got this." "You're not taking either of us," Sebastian said, his voice cold and final. Dominic laughed, a low, unsettling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "We'll see about that." The doorknob giggled, and I realized with a sickening jolt that Dominic was trying to force his way in. Sebastian stepped back, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. The door creaked as Dominic's weight pressed against it, and I could hear the faint sound of him fiddling with something, a lockpick, maybe. My breath came in short, shallow bursts, my mind racing. What do we do? What do we do? Sebastian's voice broke through my panic, low and urgent. When I opened the door, you run. Get to the car and drive. Don't look back. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I'm not leaving you. Alexander, he said, his voice sharp, his eyes boring into mine. You have to. I can handle this, but not if I'm worried about you. Before I could argue, he moved. In one fluid motion, he yanked the door open, and Dominic stumbled forward, caught off guard. Sebastian lunged, shoving him back into the wall. Chaos erupted. Dominic recovered quickly, twisting out of Sebastian's grasp with a snarl. He was wiry, his movements jerky and unpredictable, like a cornered animal. His eyes, dark, wild, and filled with something I couldn't quite place, locked onto me. You're coming with me, he spat, and he lunged. I swung the lamp on instinct, the weight of it sending a shock through my arms as it connected with Dominic's shoulder. He grunted, more surprised than hurt, and stumbled back. Sebastian was on him in an instant, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall again. You don't touch him, Sebastian growled, his voice low and dangerous. You don't even look at him. Dominic smirked, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Still protective, huh? Some things never change. Sebastian's fist collided with Dominic's face, the sound of impact echoing through the room. Dominic staggered, but didn't go down. He laughed, a hollow, broken sound, and wiped the blood from his lip. You think this changes anything? You're mine, Sebastian. You always have been. I'm not yours, Sebastian snapped, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. I haven't been for a long time. Dominic's eyes flicked to me again, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Maybe not, but he is. The words hung in the air like a threat, heavy and unspoken. Sebastian's grip on Dominic tightened, but it was too late. Dominic twisted free, his movements unervingly fast, and bolted out the door. Sebastian hesitated for just a second, torn between chasing after him and staying with me. Go, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. I'll be fine. Sebastian hesitated, his eyes searching mine for something. Reassurance, maybe. Then he nodded, his expression hardening. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone. He was gone before I could respond, and I slammed the door shut, fumbling with the lock. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely turn the latch. I pressed my back against the door, clutching the lamp tightly, and tried to steady my breathing. The silence that settled over the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat. Minutes passed, or maybe it was hours. I couldn't tell. My mind raced with images of Sebastian and Dominic, of what might be happening outside. I wanted to go after him, to help, but I remembered Sebastian's words. Don't look back. Then a sound. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching the door. I froze, holding my breath, my grip on the lamp tightening. The doorknob rattled softly, and my heart seized. Alexander. A voice called, low and familiar. It's me. It was Sebastian. Relief flooded through me, but I hesitated. What if it's not him? What if it's Dominic, pretending? Alexander, he said again, his voice softer this time. Open the door. I reached for the lock, my hand trembling, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it. Prove it to you. There was a pause, and then, through the crack under the door, I saw a small object slide into view. A keychain, one I noticed earlier, attached to Sebastian's car keys. It was shaped like a compass, the metal worn but still gleaming. I'd seen it before. I'd seen it in his hand. I unlocked the door and pulled it open, and there he was, Sebastian, his face bruised but his eyes as steady as ever. He stepped inside, locking the door behind him, and turned to me. For a long moment, we just stood there, the air between us charged with something I couldn't quite name. Are you okay? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. I am now. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and I felt something shift between us. There was no going back now. We were in this together, whatever this was. The danger, the fear, the unspoken tension. It all faded into the background as I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't noticed before. Something I couldn't put into words. Sebastian reached out, his hand brushing against mine, and I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me. His touch was gentle, almost tentative, but it sent a warmth spreading through my chest that I couldn't ignore. Alexander, he said softly, his voice barely audible. There's something I need to tell you. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. What is it? He hesitated, his eyes searching mine, as if he was trying to find the right words. Sebastian's hand lingered on mine, his touch a quiet anchor in the storm of my thoughts. I could feel the weight of his hesitation, the way his fingers trembled ever so slightly before he pulled away. His eyes, steady and yet so deeply vulnerable, held mine in a way that made it impossible to look anywhere else. He began again, his voice catching. He swallowed hard, his throat working as if the words were lodged there, refusing to come out. There's so much you don't know about me, Alexander. About why Dominic is after me. Why I can't let him near you. The air between us felt charged, thick with something I couldn't quite name. I leaned in closer, my curiosity and fear warring within me. Tell me, I urged, my voice barely above a whisper. I want to understand. He looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening, before he turned back to me. Dominic wasn't always like this. We were close once. Too close. I thought I knew him. But I was wrong. He's obsessed with control, with owning people. And when I tried to walk away, he couldn't let me go. The admission hung between us, heavy and raw. My mind raced, trying to piece together what he was saying, but the implications were too vast to grasp all at once. Dominic, he was more than just a friend to you, wasn't he? I asked carefully, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to steady it. Sebastian's expression shifted, a flicker of pain crossing his features before he masked it. Yes, and it was my mistake to think that it could ever be anything but toxic. But now, he's fixated on me, and he won't stop until he has me back in his grip. I felt a surge of protectiveness rise within me, unexpected but undeniable. I won't let him hurt you, I said firmly, my voice stronger now. I don't care what it takes. You're not alone in this. His eyes softened, and for the first time since we'd met, I saw something in them that looked like hope. You don't know what you're saying, Alexander. This isn't your fight. It is now, I replied without hesitation. You trusted me enough to bring me here, to tell me the truth. That means something. He stared at me for a long moment, his gaze searching mine as if he was trying to find some hidden flaw, some reason to push me away. But I held his stare, unwilling to back down. Finally, he exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. You're too good for this, he muttered, almost to himself. Maybe, I said with a small, nervous smile. But I'm here, Sebastian, and I'm not going anywhere. The room seemed to shrink around us, the space between us crackling with something unspoken. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt the walls he'd built around himself begin to crumble. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice rough. I don't know how to let someone in. You're not alone in that, I said softly, my own walls shifting in response. But maybe we can figure it out together. He hesitated, his eyes flickering with a mix of fear and longing. And then, slowly, he reached out, his hand cupping my cheek. His touch was warm, tentative but deliberate, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. Alexander, he murmured, his voice low and husky. I don't know what's happening between us, but I can't ignore it anymore. His words sent a shiver down my spine, and I leaned into his touch, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Neither can I admitted, my voice barely audible. For a moment, we just stood there, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. And then, slowly, he leaned in, his breath warm against my skin. I closed my eyes, my pulse racing as I felt the distance between us shrink to nothing. But before our lips could meet, a sharp knock echoed through the room, jolting us both apart. Sebastian's eyes snapped to the door, his body tensing instantly. Stay behind me, he ordered, his voice tight with urgency. I nodded, my heart hammering as I followed him to the door. He peered through the peephole, his expression hardening. It's him, he said tersely. My stomach dropped. Dominic. Sebastian nodded, his jaw clenched. Stay quiet. No matter what happens, don't open this door. Sebastian, I started, but he cut me off with a sharp shake of his head. Promise me, he insisted, his voice low and urgent. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I promise. He gave me one last look, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and something else I couldn't quite place. And then, he opened the door. Dominic stood on the threshold, his wiry frame vibrating with barely contained energy. His eyes darted past Sebastian to me, and a cold smile spread across his face. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with malice. Looks like I'm not the only one who's been waiting for this moment. Sebastian stepped forward, blocking Dominic's view of me. Leave him out of this, he said, his voice steady but laced with warning. Dominic's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Oh, I don't think so. You've made this personal, Sebastian. And now, you're going to pay for it. The tension in the air was suffocating, and I could feel the danger radiating off Dominic in waves. Sebastian took another step forward, his posture protective and unyielding. You want me? Fine, but leave him alone. Dominic's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he might lunge forward. But instead, he let out a low, humorless laugh. You always did have a soft spot for strays. But this time, you're not walking away. Before I could react, Sebastian shoved the door shut, locking it with a swift motion. He turned to me, his expression grim. We need to go. Now. I nodded, my mind racing as I followed him to the window. He pushed it open, glancing back at the door as the sound of pounding began to echo through the room. Climb out, he ordered, his voice tight with urgency. I'll be right behind you. I hesitated, looking at him with fear and uncertainty. Sebastian. Go. He barked, his voice sharp but not unkind. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I hoisted myself onto the windowsill. Just as I was about to drop down, I felt his hand on my back, steadying me. Be careful, he murmured, his voice softer now. I looked back at him, our eyes meeting for a brief, charged moment. And then, I jumped. The cold night air hit me as I landed on the uneven ground below the window. My heart was pounding, and I could hear the muffled thuds of Dominic's fists against the motel door above. Sebastian followed quickly, landing with a soft grunt beside me. He didn't waste a second, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the shadows of the building. We need to move, he whispered, his voice low and urgent. I didn't argue. My legs felt shaky, but I forced myself to keep up with him as we skirted the edge of the motel, staying out of the glow of the streetlights. The sound of Dominic's voice carried through the night, sharp and angry, but the words were indistinguishable. Sebastian's grip on my arm tightened, and I could feel the tension radiating from him. We reached the back of the motel, where a narrow alley led to the main road. Sebastian paused, scanning the area before pulling me forward again. My breath came in short, shallow bursts, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me. Every sound made me jump, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in the wind. Where are we going? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Somewhere safe, he replied, his tone clipped. Safe. The word felt foreign, almost laughable in this moment. How could anywhere be safe when Dominic was out there, determined to find us? We reached his car, parked in a shadowed corner of the lot. Sebastian unlocked it quickly, urging me inside before sliding into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and he peeled out of the lot, tires screeching against the asphalt. I gripped the edge of my seat, my heart in my throat as we sped down the empty road. The silence inside the car was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine and the sound of our breathing. I glanced at Sebastian, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The streetlights cast shifting shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his expression. He's not going to stop, I said, my voice trembling. Sebastian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I know. There was something in his tone, a weariness, a resignation that made my chest ache. I wanted to ask him more, to dig deeper into the history between him and Dominic, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I leaned back in my seat, trying to steady my racing thoughts. We drove for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. The landscape shifted from the dimly lit streets of the city to the darker, quieter roads of the outskirts. Sebastian finally pulled into the parking lot of a small, secluded motel, the kind of place that looked like it hadn't seen a guest in months. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, his hands still gripping the wheel. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw worked as if he were chewing on unspoken words. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes meeting mine in the dim light. Stay here, he said, his voice firm. I'll get us a room. I nodded, watching as he stepped out of the car and disappeared into the office. My mind raced, replaying the events of the night, Dominic's furious pounding on the door, the way Sebastian had shielded me, the look in his eyes when he told me to be careful. There was something there, something unspoken that I couldn't quite put into words. Sebastian returned moments later, holding a key in his hand. He opened my door, and I followed him to the room, the air between us heavy with unspoken tension. The room was small and sparse, the faint smell of mildew lingering in the air. Sebastian locked the door behind us, and I stood awkwardly in the center of the room, unsure of what to do next. He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Are you okay? The question took me by surprise. I think so. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. This isn't how I wanted things to go. I hesitated, searching for the right words. You couldn't have known he'd find us. I should have been more careful. There was a self-reproach in his voice that made my chest tighten. Sebastian, I took a step toward him, my heart pounding. You're not responsible for what he does. You're not. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world had faded away, leaving only the two of us in this small, dimly lit room. I could see the struggle in his expression, the weight of everything he'd been carrying. And then, without thinking, I reached out, my fingers brushing against his arm. The touch was electric, sending a jolt through me. Sebastian froze, his eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. And then, slowly, he closed the distance between us, his hand coming up to rest against my cheek. His touch was warm, grounding, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. Our eyes met, and I could see the conflict in his gaze, the pull between what he wanted and what he thought he should do. My heart was pounding, every nerve in my body alight with anticipation. Alexander, his voice was soft, barely more than a whisper. I didn't know what to say, couldn't find the words. Instead, I leaned into him, my body acting on instinct. His other hand came to rest on my waist, and I could feel the heat of his touch through the fabric of my shirt. The moment stretched, the air between us charged with something I couldn't name. And then, just as I thought he might close the distance, a sharp knock on the door shattered the silence. We both froze, the spell broken. Sebastian's expression hardened, and he stepped back, his hand dropping from my cheek. "Stay here," he said, his voice low and firm. I nodded, my heart racing as he moved toward the door. He peered through the peephole, his body tensing. And then he turned back to me, his eyes filled with urgency. "Get in the bathroom. Lock the door." I didn't argue, moving quickly to the small bathroom and shutting the door behind me. I locked it, my hands trembling as I pressed my ear against the wood. I could hear the muffled sound of voices, Sebastian's deep and steady, another voice sharp and angry. "Dominic." My breath caught, and I pressed myself against the door, trying to hear what was being said. The voices grew louder, more heated, and I could feel the tension rising. And then, a loud crash made me jump, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sebastian," I whispered, my voice barely audible. There was no response, only the sound of scuffling outside the door. My mind raced, fear gripping me as I debated what to do. And then, the handle of the bathroom door jiggled, and I felt my blood run cold. "Alexander," Sebastian's voice came through the door, low and urgent. "Open the door." I hesitated for a moment before unlocking it and stepping out. Sebastian stood there, his breathing heavy, his expression grim. Behind him, the room was in disarray, the table overturned, a lamp shattered on the floor. "He's gone," Sebastian said, his voice tight. "For now." I took a shaky breath, my body trembling with adrenaline. "What happened?" Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, his jaw clenched. "He's not going to stop. He's made that clear." I stepped closer to him, my heart aching at the look in his eyes. "We'll figure this out. Together." He looked at me, his expression softening slightly. "You don't have to do this. You can walk away." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. And in that moment, I knew that walking away wasn't an option. Not anymore. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Sebastian's eyes searched mine, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. And then he reached out, his hand brushing against mine. His touch was tentative, almost unsure, and I felt my heart skip a beat. "We'll figure it out," he murmured, his voice soft. "Together." I nodded, my hand tightening around his. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were in this together, and whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. The sound of sirens in the distance shattered the moment, and Sebastian's grip on my hand tightened. "We need to move," he said, his voice low and urgent. I nodded, my heart pounding as he grabbed our things and led me toward the door. The night was far from over, and the danger was far from gone. But as we stepped out into the darkness, I couldn't help but feel that we were closer than ever to finding a way out. "Where are we going?" I asked as we reached the car. Sebastian glanced at me, his eyes filled with determination. "Somewhere he won't find us." I nodded, sliding into the passenger seat. As the engine roared to life, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but with Sebastian by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next.